So, Tobias, I want to talk about the camera package that you chose for this film and the lens package that you chose, and why. Because we had mentioned before that you did have some very specific, challenges with being in the same space for such a long time in such a small space. So, what did you ultimately choose?
We shot the movie with the Venice Sony camera in a large format, and we used the size Supreme primes. And it was interesting because, I like to change lenses. I'm not a person that uses one set of lenses or one camera. To me, it's more like, nowadays the cameras are like film stocks to me because, what we used to choose like a higher speed film because they had more contrast or more grain and, or the colors, certain colors that came with the film stock. Now, to me, it's a little bit like this with digital cameras, right? I pick a digital camera for certain movies. Same with lenses. The one thing was, knowing being in this space, I wanted a smaller camera. There was a choice between, at the time, the Alexa LF was out as a large format camera, but it's a large body and it's bigger and it's heavier. And Mini LF wasn't out yet, or just had been coming out, but there wasn't enough cameras around. And so I chose the Sony Venice because of its size. And I had done a movie with it before. I actually got introduced to it by my daughter, who is an upcoming director. And she and a really good DP friend of mine shot a small demo film, a short demo film for the size Supreme lenses. And they used the Sony Venice camera. And the DP is John Schaffner. I don't know if I mentioned this, but he is one of the most talented DPs that I know. And the two of them did this short film, and it was so beautiful that I ended up going like, wow, I want to use that camera and those lenses on my next film. And I used it on a Netflix movie, Spencer Confidential, with Pete Burke. And then I used the camera with Ender's lenses on a small short film, Refugee, before I started doing Ma Rainey. So I was familiar with the package. But quite honestly, I didn't think I was going to use this size Supremes. My idea was, it's a period piece. I'm probably going to use, I wanted to explore older anamorphic lenses. I wanted to explore maybe older large format lenses like the Canon K35s or the Leica M's. So I got a whole, like three different packages. I got the Canon K35 sent out by Kessler Camera to Pittsburgh when I did my first camera test. The Leica M's, and I got anamorphic lenses.
So you were thinking anamorphic with that lens pairing because it was a period piece taking place in the 20s.
Well, 20s, and also just like I like the characteristics. I wanted to have like maybe a little bit more characteristics to the to the image and to the lenses. But and then I just, for safety, I brought out another set of the size Supremes, just thinking like I'll show George what the difference is. And I shot all the lenses, and I usually in my camera tests, I do, extreme wrap focuses, and I go extreme close-ups, and I put lens flares in it just to see how they react. And after I shot, and I used proper, the production designer gave me like colors of the set, like on flats, and Anne Ross, the costume designer, gave me, costumes to test. I do that all for my lens tests just to see how they react to color and camera and everything. But once the tests came back and I watched them with George, I really like the Canon K35s because they flare a little bit more. They have a little bit more softness to the edges. But he just felt that he didn't want to distract anything with the lenses, right? He wanted to be able, he didn't want to have too much breathing in the focus pulse. He didn't want to distort too much on the wider end of the lenses. And we wanted to be as wide and close as we could to the actors, just to have that intimate relationship between the camera and the actors, to be close to them. So,
why did he not want that?
He just did not want to distract anything.
Stylistically, he just wasn't interested in it.
Yeah, he was just like he felt like if I'm aware of a lens, of the characteristics of a lens, it's taking away from the actors possibly, right? And that was the one thing that I learned in that test was like, okay, I don't want to do anything that takes away from the performance. And the size Supremes are great. They're beautiful lenses. You can get very close with them. They have very little distortion on the wider end. And I'm very happy that we ended up using them. I did soften them a little bit. I used actually a Tiffin glimmer glass. It's called, it's a bronze glimmer glass. It's a diffusion filter that has a little bit of warmth in the highlights. It creates a little warmth in the highlights. I hadn't used this filter for many, many years, but I've used it before on a commercial on darker skin, and I really like what it did to the highlights. And I kind of like in the last moment when we were testing, I brought a whole bunch of filter packages out just to see what I wanted to use. I ended up bringing the glimmer glass out, and that was our diffusion we used throughout the whole movie.
Wow, I'm looking at it now, just the Tiffin glimmer glass. Yeah, I mean, well, so what did this do to highlights? And then you had mentioned also for darker skin. What does it give you?
It blooms because, the heat and the sweat that we wanted to show, I wanted to kind of bloom the highlights a little bit. Yeah. And that diffusion filter just blooms highlights a little bit. You'll see it like it just diffuses or gives it a bit of a halo around highlights, just slightly. But it has also, that filter comes as a regular glimmer glass or as a bronze glimmer glass. The bronze is really I call it always the gold glimmer glass, and drove my camera assistants crazy because I thought it had more of a gold feeling than a bronze feeling to it. But it's called the bronze glimmer glass from Tiffin, and it just puts also slight warmth into the highlights that just worked really well for this movie, I felt.